Hey, greetings. Michael Didier here. Thank you for joining me. Last week we talked about Leviticus 18. I was really hoping to get to 19 as well. We didn't. Have to do that today. You know, so much of what I show you are things hard to be seen. You know, part of it is this thing right here. The children of Israel. We have so many false ideas about who these people are that our minds can't see the truth. And every week, I try to drive this home that there's two kinds of people in Israel. One of them is Israel. They are the Ezra men. Ezra men, the native-born man. How can I communicate this more? You know, sometimes those of you who are with me online every week, it may seem a bit repetitive because I try to drive these things home on a regular basis. Yehovah, when he took us out of Egypt, oh gosh, what does the first commandment say? I am Yehovah, your Elohim, right here. I am Yehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. All of us who he's numbering when he says, brought you out of the land of Egypt, are Ezra men. They call us Israel, or B'nai Israel, Israel's seed. Spiritually born men. All the other men, B'nai Abraham, B'nai Esau, B'nai Heth, they're all men, multi-generational men. But B'nai Israel is the spiritually born men. He told us right here, according to the doings of the land of Egypt, where you dwelt, you shall not do. And according to the doings of the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you, you shall not do, nor shall you walk in their ordinances. He's talking to his Ezra men. We're going to see this over and over and over. We're going to see it today again. This is who he always speaks with, his Ezra men. Then we have the Ger who dwell with us. But look at how he finishes. You shall observe my judgments and keep my ordinances to walk in them. Look at how he finishes it. Same way he started it. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Two kinds of men in Israel. One is Israel, the other is the Ger who dwell with them. Heads of households is who we're talking about. He numbered us 600,000 when we came out of Egypt with our families. Could argue that's children, and the mixed heads of households that went with us. 600,000. We can look at it. All we got to do is go to Numbers 1. We see it 603,550. All the males are numbered, 20 and above, all of Israel's seed. Didn't number any females. But we have this poor information. You know, it's what we think we already know that keeps us from seeing things new. How did Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens say it? It's not what you know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. There's so many bad ideas that we have. How does a man become Israel? We talked about it lots and lots and lots. He's got to leave the kingdom of his birth. That's how he becomes a ger. He joins himself to Yehovah's people, Israel. They begin to teach him. And then at Passover, he eats the Passover lamb after he's been circumcised. Yes, we're still talking about circumcision. And then becomes as one born in the land. Israel, all Israel in Egypt, became as one born in the land just before they left Egypt. They left Pharaoh's authority first. That's why they didn't get the darkness. Pharaoh's people got the darkness because they weren't dwelling under his authority any longer. There's much that we have to learn. It was only then that he gave Israel, not the ger, not the women, not the children. He gave Israel his 10 commandments to begin with. Well, last week, we talked about all these things. These are sexual prohibitions. Women that Israel is not allowed to take to themselves and become intimate with. Their mother, their father's wife, their sister, their sister's daughter. Well, there was a whole lineage of things. We talked about a woman and her sister. We talked about a woman and her daughter, a woman and her son's daughter, a woman and her daughter's daughter. All those are prohibited. We talked about man taking another man, man taking an animal, or a woman exposing herself to an animal. But they're all written to Israel's seed, the nakedness of thy father, or the nakedness of thy mother, thou shalt not uncover. Nakedness. We're not talking about having sex with your father. We're talking about having sex with your father's woman. Look what it says here in 10. The nakedness of your son's daughter or thy daughter's daughter. Their nakedness thou shalt not uncover, for theirs is thy own nakedness. So when we're talking about our father's nakedness, we're talking about his woman. Well, that has implications if we're talking about a woman and her daughter, or a woman and his daughter's daughter. The nakedness of your son's daughter, the nakedness of your daughter's daughter. No, let's go down here. I want you to see this. Here it is, 17. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter. We're talking about taking two women. You don't take a woman and her daughter. Taking two women isn't the problem. Taking a woman and her daughter is the problem. Or a woman and her daughter's daughter. A woman and her sister. Too close. Well, he says, do not defile yourselves with any of these things. He uses the plural, yourselves there. For by all these the Gentiles are defiled, which I am casting out before you. For the land is defiled, therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it. And the land vomits out its inhabitants. Did you hear that? The land is going to vomit out its inhabitants. Oh, so very interesting. Remember, the righteous stay on the earth. We got this crazy idea that somehow there's going to be a rapture. No, the righteous remain on the earth. The wicked are taken from it, not the righteous. He finishes the same way he started. Therefore, you shall keep my ordinances, so that you do not commit any of these abominable customs, which were committed before you, and that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. You hear that? Your Elohim. Yehovah is the Elohim of the Ezra men. All the others dwell with the Ezra men. That's why they're the Ger, who dwells with thee. Your woman follows you. Yehovah's not telling your woman to do anything except follow you. Thy desire shall be for thy man, and he shall rule over you. Yehovah didn't even talk to the woman in the garden until she was in trouble, and then all he did was remind her that she's a helper. She follows her man. No man, no relationship with Yehovah. Does a woman go into the temple? Does a woman bring an offering? No, no, no. We've much to learn. Let's keep our eyes open and see what we can find out today. 19 is where we're going to begin. And again, look at who he's speaking with. We see all the congregation of the children of Israel. Oh, Father, it's so confusing. Here's what we're looking at. Speak to all Israel's seeds assembly. Israel's seeds assembly. This is all the assembly of Israel's seed. And say to them, holy you shall become, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am holy. Holy you shall become. We don't start out holy. Even eating that Passover lamb, we become as Kassid. We see that in Psalms 5. I want to look at this word holy. Kodesh or Kadosh. Look what it says here. The Hebrew word translated as holy is Kadosh. Kaf, Dalet, Shin. The ancient Hebrew ideograph gives us great understanding as to the meaning of this word. The letter Kaf is a picture of the back of a head and conveys the idea of being behind. The Dalet is the picture of a door swinging back and forth. You could have it this way as well. And conveys the idea of opening and closing or swinging back and forth. The letter Shin is a picture of teeth and conveys the idea of eating, biting, crushing. The last two, the Dalet and the Shin, of this word form the Hebrew word dash, which is a word for threshing. Hear that? This is a word for threshing. In these, remember, threshing is when we take our grain and we separate the seed from the chaff. In these two ideographs, Dalet Shin, we see the heavy sled that was pulled back and forth over the grain to thresh it in order to separate the chaff from the seed. When we add the letter Kaf to this picture, it conveys the idea of pure seed. That's what Yehovah wants, is pure seed. And we go through a process. He puts us through a process. It's painful. of becoming pure seed, holy as he is holy. We got to get the chaff out of our life, which is left behind after the threshing and winnowing is complete. So the word kadosh can be understood as referring to the state of being after the chaff has been removed. In other words, the word holy implies a state of being without mixture. We don't want the chaff mixed with the seed. We want a pure seed. Israel is called to be without mixture, just as Yehovah is without mixture. This is why we talked about last week how we the women that we are allowed to take to ourselves. Really, we talked about the women who were not allowed to take to ourselves. So much to see. Here, this goes along the same line. And you shall be holy. This is the end of 26. We're going to get to it maybe today. And you shall be holy to me, for I, Yehovah, am holy. And it separated you from the peoples. You can't be with the peoples and be Yehovah's. That you should be mine. You know what? I got to go back. Look at 18. According to the doings of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, you shall not do. According to the doings of the land of Canaan where I'm bringing you, you shall not do. Nor shall you walk in their ordinances. We walk in the world's ordinances. Why? Because we got their driver's license, we got their social security numbers, we got their birth certificates, we got their marriage licenses. The covenants that we have made with the world is destroying us, and we've got to leave. The way we leave is the same way Abraham left. He dwelt in the land of promise as in a strange country, a heavenly country. We follow Yehovah's statutes, his judgments, and his ordinances. Abraham was a spiritually born man, just like we're supposed to be. But you can't be in the world and consider yourself one of Yehovah's men. It doesn't work. Well, I know this is hard to see. We've got this crazy idea that somehow we're in Jesus, the Messiah, don't you know? Well, does Yehovah change? Does his word endure forever or not? Who gave us that New Testament? When Paul and Silas were talking to the Bereans, they searched the scriptures to see if what they said was so. Which scriptures did they search? There was no New Testament. The writings that Timothy had known as a child that were good for reproof and instruction. Which scriptures were those? There was no New Testament. No, we're talking about Yehovah's word. Don't forget that. Close that New Testament and start learning Yehovah's word. It'll keep you safe. Well, let's go back. This is really an interesting chapter we're going to talk about today, chapter 19. Again, speak to all the congregation speak to all Israel's seeds assembly and say to them, holy you shall become, for I am holy. Did I read this last one here? Yes, I did. Let's go to 19:3. He says, every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Those are key words. Learn to watch for those words. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Not the Elohim of the Ger. He's the Elohim of the Ezra. It's code word. We can catch it. It helps us give us a better understandings. But look at this. This is revere his mother and his father. Here's the word that they're using, revere. It's yareh, fear. They say morally to revere. Frighten of fright. Fear your mother and your father. Listen to what they have to say. Don't have to agree, but listen to what they have to say and take it to heart. Keep my Sabbaths. Does that sound familiar? Look at this. Here's the first commandment, or the first thing he talked about here. Speak to all Israel's seeds assembly. You shall be holy, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim. There we go. Let's get it right here. For I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am holy. That's the first commandment, isn't it? What did he say? I am Yehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Thou shalt have no other Elohim existing before my face. It's the first commandment. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Now he's got the fourth commandment. Revere his mother and his father. Keep my Sabbaths. What's that? The fifth commandment. Do you hear what's going on here? We're going to get some additional light that's going to help us understand these commandments better. Let's go to 4. He says, do not turn towards the worthless things. We want to say idols. Here's the word. El-el, good for nothing. By analogy, vain, vanity. They said specifically an idol. Well, you know what? I think many times we call things idols as an excuse. I don't have any idols in my life. You know what? I think we do. How many times do we say, well, it's in the Constitution, the flag of the United States of America? Oh, there's so many things that we've done. Vanity. Vanity. Look at this. Empty things. This is the word right here again. El or El. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Father, I love dwelling in your tent. He brings the princes to nothing and makes the judges of the earth as vanity. Vanity. You know what? We just elected, not we, the U.S. citizens, not Yehovah's people. We already have an Elohim. They just elected a new Elohim to serve and to bow down to. You think, oh, I don't serve him. Yeah, you do. You go to court, what do they say? All rise. Everybody stands up. I don't. Everybody else does. I don't worship in that court. Do not turn to worthless, empty things, nor make for yourselves molten images. Hear that? Empty things, molded images. Not the same thing. What does he say? I am Yehovah, your Elohim. What's that? That's the third commandment. Idols. No, second commandment, idols. We're going to get to taking his name in vain too. Now, look at this verse. This is number 5. It says, if you offer a sacrifice of a peace offering. There's hardly anything in this that's right. You shall offer it of your own free will. Is that what it says? You'll be flabbergasted. Here's what it actually says. And when ye slaughter a slaughter of shalomim unto Yehovah, for your delight ye shall slaughter it. Remember the slaughtered shalomim? This is what we talk about in chapter 4 of Leviticus, chapter 7 of Leviticus. We talk about what is clean meat in chapter 11 of Leviticus. And then in 17, we talked about slaughtering our slaughters to Yehovah, not the Elohim of the land. And when ye slaughter a slaughter of the shalomim unto Yehovah, for your delight ye shall slaughter it. Remember, slaughter is the thing that we eat. We eat the meat. If it's slaughtered, we eat it. We're doing it for our delight. Hey, come on over. I just slaughtered a vow offering. I just slaughtered a free will offering to Yehovah. I brought it home. We got 2 days to eat it. Well, we saw in Leviticus 17 that if the place where Yehovah puts his name is too far from us, we can't slaughter it to him. Because in order to do that, we have to have a temple. We have to have a priesthood. We have to have an altar. The fat's got to be burned on the altar. We're going to give a breast to the priest and a leg to the priest. And then we're going to take it home and we're going to enjoy it. Delight ye shall, for your delight ye shall slaughter it. When Yehovah thy Elohim enlarges thy borders. You know, this is where we are right now. In some ways, he hasn't enlarged our border. We don't have our borders yet. There is no Israel's land yet. But we're going to get it because the whole earth is Yehovah's and all those who dwell in it. He says, when Yehovah thy Elohim enlarges thy borders, as he has promised thee, and thou say, let me eat meat. We haven't been eating meat. Why? Because we have to slaughter it to him, and he's too far away. So we're not eating meat. Well, he's got a remedy for that. We saw it a couple weeks ago. Let me eat meat, because thou longs to eat meat. You may eat as much meat as your heart desires. For your delight ye shall slaughter it. You may eat as much meat as your heart desires. If the place where Yehovah thy Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from thee, then thou may slaughter from thy herds and from thy flocks. Remember, that's the sheep and the goats, which Yehovah has given thee, just as I have commanded thee. And thou may eat within thy gates as much as thy heart desires. Just as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you may eat them. Hear that? If the place where Yehovah puts his name is too far from us, we are allowed to eat the sheep and the goat and the cattle without bringing it to him. We get to slaughter it just like we would slaughter, what does it say? A deer or a gazelle. So thou may eat them. The unclean and the clean may eat them. Remember, if it was a slaughtered shalomim that we brought to him, only the clean in our house get to eat it. Anyone who's unclean can't eat it. If we have friends coming over, if they're unclean, they can't eat it. Have to be careful. Bring problems on yourself by eating something that's holy. He says, only be sure that thou dost not eat the blood, for the blood is the life. Thou may not eat the life with the meat. Thou shalt not eat it. Thou shalt pour it on the earth like water. You know what? What we saw 2 weeks ago was that we, or our friends, I suppose, could do that as well. Slaughter the meat. Make sure that the blood goes into the ground, and then we can eat it, just like we do the gazelle and the deer. The blood's got to go into the ground. Most hunters are going to make sure that's the case. But for the most part, it's the man who killed it who's the man who eats it. We aren't going to the grocery store to take meat that hasn't been slaughtered properly. Well, that's a whole another story that we can get into, but we did that a couple weeks ago. Let's move on. Verse 6. He says, it shall be eaten the same day you offer it, or on the next day, which is what we were just talking about. If any remains until the third day, it shall be burned in the fire. Now, I read you what it says. They use this word offer. Look at what it says. It shall be eaten the same day you slaughter it, is actually what it says. And on the next day. So now this is what we learned in 7 of Leviticus. And if the slaughter of his korban, remember the korban is about drawing near to Yehovah, is a vow or is spontaneous, it shall be eaten the same day that he brings his slaughter. But on the next day, the remainder of it also may be eaten. The remainder of the flesh of the slaughter on the third day must be burned with fire. Got to learn to read correctly. I see I had a sacrifice I left in there. It's a slaughter. Check it out. You'll see I'm right. He says, if it is eaten at all on the third day, it is an, here's the word, pigul. Pigul. It's a pigul. It's stinky. It's foul. Yehovah doesn't want anything to do with it. It shall not be accepted, he says. Therefore, he who eats it shall bear his evil. What was meant to be a blessing to our family has now, because we've taken so long to eat it, become evil to us. Because he has profaned a hollow thing, a Kodesh thing of Yehovah. And that person shall be cut off from his people. How many of us can be cut off from his people and we're not even knowing it? You know, remember in Acts, I think it was Acts 15, it talked about 5 things that James, they were having a big dispute about who was supposed to be circumcised and all this stuff. And James said, forget about the circumcision. Don't worry about the circumcision for the nugars, the people who are just turning to Yehovah, leaving the kingdom of a birth. He gave them 5 things. One of them was meat sacrificed to idols. Don't eat meat that is not killed properly, is what he's talking about. He said, don't eat blood. Don't be involved in sexual immorality. What sexual immorality? It's what we talked about last week. It's what we're going to talk about this week. Last week he gave us the statutes. This week he's going to give us the results of breaking those statutes, those instructions. What was the last one? Things strangled? and blood. Don't be involved in this stuff. But the last thing he gave was keep the Sabbath. These are things to keep us in Israel so we can learn more. We aren't even learning the first one. Meat sacrificed to idols. We think we're eating clean meat, but we're not having it killed properly. And we're bringing damnation on ourselves. Learn, learn, learn what Leviticus has to say. Open our eyes, Father. Help us to see. He has eaten a hallowed thing of Yehovah. That person shall be cut off from his people. We're talking about men being cut off from his people. Who's his people? Israel! Verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape from your vineyard. Who do we save it for? Look what it says. Nor shall you gather every grape from your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the ger, the stranger. There it is. And the ger, and for the ger, or and to the ger. I would say and for the ger. But there it is right there. Not talking to us, is he? We're the ones that own the land. Israel owns land. Ger doesn't own land. Ger doesn't have a crop. Ger is gleaning. He is the ger who dwells with thee. The thee is Israel. All the assembly of Israel's seed, or Israel's seed's assembly. Now, look what he says here. Oh, and again, finishes up. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Who's he talking to? Not talking to the ger, obviously. We're leaving it for the poor and the ger. You know, because we don't see and understand the Ezra and the ger, it leaves us open to misinterpretation all throughout the scriptures. We've got to learn who these two people are. These two men are. Verse 11. Look at. He says, you shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. Lie to one another. Even that's corrupt. Look what it says. You shall not steal. You shall not steal, nor lie, nor deceive a man to his companion. Who's he talking to? He's talking to men. He's talking to Israel's seed. But this is what? The 8th commandment. Thou shalt not steal. But now he's giving us a little bit more information about that commandment. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie, nor deceive a man to his companion. We're gleaning more information. A man to his companion. That could have some implications. You shall not cheat your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you until all night, until morning. This word neighbor is this word right here. Reah. Reah. They want to say associates. They actually want to make it brother. This is, see that brother? It's after the dash. That's how it's translated, but that's not what it says. More or less close, an associate. I will argue that this is not the word for brother. This is the word for somebody else. You shall not cheat your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you until evening. Your neighbor. You shall not cheat your neighbor. Who is our neighbor? We know who the you is. Really, this is the thou. Thou shalt not cheat thy neighbor. If it's a thou, who are we talking to? Right here. All the assembly of Israel's seed. Thou shalt not cheat thy neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall remain with thee all night, and shall not remain with thee all night until morning. That's re'ah. That's the neighbor. We're going to see there's going to be different words that we're going to use for this neighbor. This is going to be very important when we get to Leviticus 19:18 and 19:34, because it's going to help us to see things that we probably haven't seen before. We've learned some things from the New Testament that just aren't correct. We've got to learn more. He says, thou shalt not curse the deaf. Curse the deaf. Can the deaf hear you? Nor put a stumbling block before the blind. Thou shalt fear thy Elohim. I am Yehovah. He cares about the deaf. He cares about the blind. He says, don't take advantage of their disabilities. Now he goes with the plural. You, y'all, shall do no injustice in judgment. Thou shalt not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge thy neighbor. Here's another word, amith. They again want to use associate. I would use, I think, companion, perhaps even brother. In righteousness you shall judge thy neighbor. He says in 16, thou shalt not go about as a talebearer. I really liked how BBE, Bible in Basic English, put this. Do not go about saying untrue things among your people, to take away the lifeblood of thy associates. There's the ra'ah again, right here. Again, I am Yehovah. He's putting his name with it. There's authority there. Don't do that. 17. Thou shalt not hate thy brother. Thou shalt not hate thy brother. I'm reading it on the right. That's aki. In thy heart. Thou shalt surely rebuke thy companion. Here it is. Don't hate him. Rebuke him. There's the companion. Thy companion. Amith. And not bear sin because of him. The Contemporary Jewish Bible said this: do not hate your brother in your heart, nor rebuke your neighbor, your companion, so that you won't carry sin because of him. Well, this reminded me of what Ezekiel tells us through Yehovah, or what Yehovah tells us through Ezekiel, I guess would be a better way to say it, wouldn't it? Look what it says. Again, when a righteous man turns from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and I lay stumbling block before him, he shall die. because he did not give him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness, which he has done, shall not be remembered. But his blood I will require at his hand, at your hand. Nevertheless, if you warn the righteous man that the righteous should not die, and he does not sin, he shall surely live because he took warning. Also, you will have delivered your soul. Not only did you deliver his soul, you delivered your soul. It goes on, if you warn him and he doesn't heed it, you've still delivered your soul. He didn't listen. Well, this is kind of what we're going on right here. We've got a brother. He stepped out of line. You shall not hate your brother. You shall surely rebuke your associate, your neighbor, your companion, and not bear sin because of him. Same principle exactly. 18. Now it gets interesting. Look what it says. I'm going to read it on the right, my translation, because it's so corrupted on the left. Thou shalt not take vengeance, nor bear a grudge against thy people's seed. Thy people's seed. If we're to understand who we're talking to, we know that we're talking about Ezra men's seed, spiritually born seed, multi-generational seed. And look what it says. And thou shalt love thy associate, thy neighbor, as thyself. Who's the thyself? The Ezra man. We have two people, Ezra and the Ger who dwell with him. Got to have them both. You know what? Most people have never even heard about an Ezra or heard about a Ger. We see it everywhere. But they have no clue what we're talking about. I want you to see something. This is going to be verse 34 of the same chapter. Look what it says. Talking about who is the Ra'ah. Here it is. Look, here's the word. For thy Ra'ah is what it says. Thou shalt love thy Ra'ah. Ra'ah. Not Ra'ah. 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 There it is there. Ra'ah. Now, we're talking about thou shalt love thy Ra'ah as thyself. I am Yehovah. Now look at verse 34. I added it here. I'm not going to go down. It's right here. Just below my link there. The stranger, the Ger, who dwells with you, who's the you, shall be as you, one born in the land. They actually use Ezra. And ye shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers, you were Gerim, in the land of Egypt. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Do you hear those words? Ye shall love him as yourself. Who's the him? The Ger, the stranger who dwells with us, Israel. Do you see how these things fit together? So just exactly who is our neighbor? You know, when Yeshua supposedly quoted this verse, he quoted, thou shalt love Yehovah with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, all your strength, Deuteronomy 6. And he quoted this verse, the foundations. But the way we understand it, because of the parable that goes along with this nonsense, it's just anyone can be our neighbor. I'm going to suggest that's not the case. We don't love just anyone as we love ourselves. Ezra men, loving Ezra men. We love the Ger who dwell with us. The Ger who has left the kingdom of his birth and has joined himself to Israel, has become the Ger who dwells with us. What does that mean? Look at this. It means this. The man who lives next door is truly not our neighbor. For our neighbors are those who do the will of our Father in heaven, the Ger. Do you see that? Are we to love the folks next door? But of course we are. But it's different, not the same way. We're bringing them, loving them into the kingdom, but we don't treat them the same way. The scriptures give us some very definite instructions on how to care for the Levites, the fatherless, the widow, and the stranger who dwells with us. It's not for the Assyrian. It's not for the Babylonian. It's not for the Egyptian. No. Levites, fatherless, widow, stranger, Ger, who gores with us. Did Israel send relief to the flood victims in Egypt? No. How about the orphans in Assyria? No, not going to happen. Or the widows in Babylon? No, he didn't. We take care of our orphans. We take care of our widows. We take care of our flood victims. Well, you know what? In our Christian understanding, I did it, sent money to orphans in other lands. Ease my conscience, make me feel like I'm really doing something for Yehovah without having any understanding about what I was doing. We don't give Yehovah's money to the heathen, to the Gentiles. But we do it all the time because we don't know any better. Yeah, there's need. But this is money that is Yehovah's money. I think we need to learn more. Who is our neighbor? The neighbor is the Ger who dwells with us. Who's the you? That's really what we should be asking ourselves. Who's the thou? Thou shalt love thy Ra'ah as ourself. We think we're the thou. We're not the thou. We're not even the neighbor. We're nobody. Because we've never made ourselves Yehovah's men by leaving the kingdom of birth and coming to him. Well, there's so much for us to understand. Let's keep going. We'll see this more. He says, y'all shall keep my statutes. Now he says, thou shalt not let thy livestock breed with mixed kind. Here it is right here. No, we're still talking about mingled, mixed. Remember, we're supposed to be pure. Thou shalt not let thy livestock breed with another kind. Thou shalt not sow your field with mixed seed. Don't mix your seed together and plant it. Nor shall a garment of mixed linen. Here's the word. Another kind, mixed, is this word right here. Kilayim. Separation, two heterogenealities, diverse seeds, two kinds, mixture is how a Brown Dry Briggs put it together. I don't really care for Brown Dry Briggs, but it works well here. Mixed, kilayim, mixed kind, mixed seed. Here he says mixed linen and wool. What are we talking about? Linen and wool. We're talking about something that comes from a plant, and we're talking about something that comes from an animal. Don't do that. You shall not let a garment of mixed linen and wool come upon you. Let me see what it has to say on the right here. Again, we're talking about being holy as Yehovah is holy. These are things that the world does. This isn't things that we do. GMO foods. You know what? Yehovah wants things to produce after their own kind. He doesn't want the DNA being messed with. I remember, where was it? Enoch. The angels taught the sons of men, man's seed, how to mess with the DNA of plants. Israel too is not to be mixed with Gentiles. Everything in Torah is to help us live holy and separate from those who will not live in holiness. You shall be holy to me, for I am holy. This is the next chapter. I have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. Talk about being separated from the peoples. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land. I will give it to you as to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yehovah, your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. We are to be separated from the peoples. He says, for you, here, let me do this. For you are a holy people to Yehovah, your Elohim. Yehovah, your Elohim, has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the people of the earth. Here's another one. For you are a holy people to Yehovah, your Elohim, and Yehovah has chosen you. Is that the same one? No, I guess not. Chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure. There he's talking about the special treasure, the segula, above all the people who are on the face of the earth. Special treasure, all the people. But it's almost the same verse, isn't it? Also today, Yehovah has proclaimed you to be his special people, his segula, just as he promised you, that you should keep all his commandments, and that he will set you high above the nations, which he has made in praise, in name, and in honor, and that you may be a holy people to Yehovah, your Elohim, your Elohim. We're talking about the Ezra man, just as he has spoken. Well, and again, this is how we started this chapter. Speak to all Israel's seeds assembly and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am holy. Verse 20 is where we're at. He says, whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man as a concubine. Hear that? Again, we're changing gears. Whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man as a concubine. Remember, a concubine is a pelagesh. Not a free woman. This is a woman who is got a different status. She's not free and has not been redeemed nor given her freedom. For this, it says, she shall be punished. Look what it says on the right here. Whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man as a concubine, and who has not at all been redeemed nor given her freedom, for this there shall be scourging. Who's going to be scourged? Doesn't really say scourging, it says punished. She shall be punished. But it's not, do you get the impression that they're both going to be scourged? It says, but they shall not be put to death. What do I have here? But they shall not be put to death because she was not free. This is a woman, a concubine, who is betrothed to another man. Might be her master, might be the master's son, might be another man altogether. She's going to get punished. We're going to see in the next verse what happens to the man. Let me just read Geneva Bible. There's others that say the same thing, but I want you to see that it's about her. She shall be scourged. You see what it says right here? And not redeemed, nor freedom given her. She shall be scourged. She shall be punished. But they shall not die, because she is not free. Now, look what it says regarding, down here. If a young woman, this is Deuteronomy 22. If a young woman, the word they're using here is na'ara, who is a virgin, is betrothed to a man, la-ish, a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both to the gate of the city, and you shall stone them to stone with stones. The young woman, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he humbled his neighbor's woman. So you shall put away evil from among you. So here's a woman who is free, also betrothed, taken by another man, or went with another man, is the implication there. She's going to get stoned. But this woman, another man's property, doesn't get stoned. She gets punished. Maybe it is scourging, but it's certainly punished because she is stepping out of line. She has a child. What do you do now? Whose child is it going to be? The man's who took her, or the master's? I would argue it's going to be the master's. Let me see what I have here. Genesis 25:16 talked about Hagar, Keturah, Bilhah, and Zilpah were all concubines because they came from their servants' quarters. Did you know that? Hagar, Keturah, Bilhah, Zilpah. They were concubines of, well, two of them were concubines of Abraham. Bilhah and Zilpah were concubines of Jacob. He had two wives as well. Ooh, a woman and her sister. Not something that we're supposed to do, is it? But Yehovah blessed him. Maybe because he was tricked. Maybe that was it. In Deuteronomy 21, I said this beautiful woman is a concubine also. Do you remember that story? Here it is right here. Let's see if I can get it in here. Oh, I guess I can't quite get it. Let me try this. I'll have to read you the first line. It says, when you go to war against your enemies, and Yehovah, your Elohim, delivers them into your hand, and you take them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and desire her, and take her for thy woman, then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall put off the clothes of her captivity, remain in your house, thy house, and mourn her father and mother a full month. After that you may go into her and be her Baal, and she shall be thy woman. Thy woman. This woman is a concubine. She's coming from the servants' quarters. She is taken captive. And it shall be, if you have no delight in her, that you shall set her free. But thou certainly shalt not sell her for money. You shall not treat her brutally, because you have humbled her. Concubines. Now the sons of Keturah Abraham's concubine. Keturah was a concubine. If a child comes from this punishable offense, who gets the child? I would argue the child would have to belong to her master. He's the one who gives her to another man. We saw that in, I don't know, maybe it was Exodus 21. That's where we talk about the servant saying, I love my wife, I love my children, I want to stay, because they're the master's children. So he becomes the master, so he can stay. He was free, but he pierces his ear, becomes the master's servant permanently, just like the woman and her children are. But he gets to stay with them if he becomes the master's. Otherwise, he's sent away without those children, without his wife, his woman. Well, hard things that we talk about sometimes, isn't it? 21. What happens to the man? Here's what happens to the man. It says, and he shall bring his asham. Asham. He's going to bring an asham. It's a korban for sin to Yehovah, to the door of the tent of meeting. What's he going to bring? A ram as an asham. There is no there's no offering in all this. It doesn't say offering, not once. The priest shall cover him with a ram of the asham before Yehovah's face, on account of his breach which he sinned, his sin which he sinned. You could say it that way. It's a breach. It's an offense. It's caused a division between the man and Yehovah. He's got to close the gap. Again, there's a breach. He's got to close the breach. So shall he have forgiveness from his breach, which his sin caused. 23. When you come into the land and have planted all kinds of trees for food, then you shall count their fruit as circumcised. Did you hear that? We're going to count the tree's fruit as circumcised. This says when you come into the land. We're not in the land right now. We don't have land. And have planted all kinds of trees for food. Fruit trees. Whether they be nuts or whatever. Then you shall count their fruit as uncircumcised. He says, 3 years it shall be uncircumcised to you. We don't eat the fruit for 3 years. We're getting our tree started off right. He says, it shall not be eaten. But look what it says now. Remember, we were talking about the first fruits go to Yehovah. Here's the first fruits of this tree. But in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be Kodesh, a praise to Yehovah. Here's Numbers 18, 12 and 13. All the best of the oil, all the best of the new wine, the grain, the first fruits, which ye offer to Yehovah, I have given them to you. He's talking to the priests. The stuff that goes to Yehovah is going to go to his priests. I've given them to you. Whatever first right fruit is in their land, which they give to Yehovah, shall be yours. Everyone who is clean in your house, in thy house, well, it could be either, I suppose. He's talking to all the priests. In your house, may eat it. So this is the 4th year. The 4th year, it gets eaten by the priests. It belongs to Yehovah. And in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, that it may yield to you all its increase. Again, I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Who's he talking to? He's talking to his Ezra men. He goes on. New thought. This is a lot of miscellaneous things, isn't it? You shall not eat anything with the blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying. I had to look these up. Here's the magic. Anan. Cover, cloud over. That is practice magic. Nor use enchantments to foretell. Use enchantments. Foretell, prognosticate. There's the word they use here in Nakash. Nakash. Whisper. Prognosticate. I had to look up prognosticate, to predict according to present indications or signs. Is that what we do when we say, oh, it's a sign? It's a sign. This happened because of this. You know what? I hate to go there. I just hate to go there. I don't want to be told it's a sign that we're supposed to do something. Yehovah will make it clear to me. I don't need a sign. Unless I ask him for it. There is time when we can ask him for that. Remember, who was it? Gideon asked for a sign. Let the fleece be wet and the ground be dry. Okay, now let the ground be dry and let the fleece be dry and the ground be wet. That was a sign, giving him some directions. But I think this, what's the word they were talking about here? It's actually the Nakash, the prognosticator, perhaps. That doesn't even look like Nakash, does it? I'd like to look at that some more. I don't have time to do it right now, though. Well, let's move on. Look what it says here. I've had people ask me about this. Michael, why'd you shave your beard? I had a beard for ages. Ages. Probably 10 years. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. People use this to say that you're supposed to have a beard. I think they do it erroneously because they don't know the Hebrew. They look at the next verse, and it usually says, you shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am Yehovah. But we miss the Vav between this verse and this verse. This doesn't say you, it says and you. And here's what it says. Look. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. And cuttings for the dead in your flesh you shall not make, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am Yehovah. Do you hear what's going on? The shaving, the cutting, the tattooing are all about for the dead. It's a grieving process. He doesn't want us to do that. Some guys can't even have beards. What do we do with them? No, that's not what it's about. Let's get it right. And it says Vav. This is a continuation. It's the same verse. Treat it like 28's not even there. Consider it an extra part of 27. Because the Vav says, and not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. Well, we got to learn more. Here, there's other places. Look at, here's Leviticus 21. Let's see what this says. I want to read all this. And Yehovah said to Moses, speak to the priests, Aaron's seed, and say to them, none shall defile himself for the dead among his people. Hear that? The priests aren't allowed to bury their dead unless they're near of kin, very near of kin, except for his relatives who are nearest to him, his mother, his father, his sons, his daughter, and his brother. Also his virgin sister, who is near to him. If she's not a virgin anymore, we don't even do it for her. His virgin sister, who is near to him, who has no husband, no man, for her, he may defile himself. Otherwise, he shall not defile himself, being a chief man among the people, to profane himself. We need him to be clean so he can do the work that we need him to do for us. They shall not make any bald place on their head, nor shall they shave the edges of their beard. Why? For the dead. Nor make any cuttings in their flesh. They shall be holy to their Elohim, and not profane the name of their Elohim. For they bring an offering to Yehovah made by fire. They're the ones who are bringing our korban to the fire of Yehovah, and the bread of their Elohim, therefore they shall, and the bread of Yehovah, their Elohim, therefore they shall be holy. We need them to be able to bring the minka and the other korban that we bring to Yehovah. Look at this. This one's a great one. I love this. It really, you won't even find this. You won't even see this in Deuteronomy 14:1. Here's what it actually says. Sons ye are to Yehovah your Elohim. Hear that? Yehovah your Elohim. You are his sons, his heir, his spiritually born men, his Kasid, who have entered into covenant with him by slaughter. It says in Psalms 50 verse 5. We're the sons. Sons ye are to Yehovah your Elohim. You see how it all fits together? We're talking about the Ezra men. You shall not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. There it is again. For you are a holy people to Yehovah your Elohim. And Yehovah has chosen you to be a people for himself. Segula. Who's the Segula? The ladies are not the Segula. The men, the Ezra men, are the special treasure above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. You know what? If the things that I say inspire you to find out more about how a man, a Gentile, leaves the kingdom of his birth and becomes a ger, joins himself with Yehovah's people, the Ezra men, Israel. And then at Passover, learns how to become Yehovah's spiritually born men, those born in the land. My work is complete. That would be the biggest thing that I could give you. We've got to understand who these two men are. One law shall be for the native born and for the ger who dwells with you. It says it 4 or 5 times in Torah. That's what the Torah is given to, but it applies to the Ezra and the ger differently. If something dies of itself, we can't eat it. The Ezra can't eat it, but we can give it to the ger, or we can sell it to the Ben Nakar, the foreigners, the Gentiles. They can eat it, but we can't. It applies differently. These are things that we've got to understand. Okay, verse 29. We're going to just make it through this chapter, I guess, today. He says, do not prostitute your daughter to cause her to be a harlot. I guess that makes you a pimp, wouldn't it? Lest the land fall into harlotry and the land become full of wickedness. You know what happens when the land becomes full of wickedness? It's going to vomit us out. This is what's going to happen to the Gentiles in the end. Got to become Yehovah's men. 30. He says, you shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence with fear. Here it is right here. It's the same word that we talked about when we are talking about you should keep my Sabbaths, revere with fear my sanctuary. Or no, here it is down here, 19:3. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father and keep my Sabbaths. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. So Here again, in the same chapter, we're talking about the fourth commandment. Do you think Yehovah is trying to make a point? We've talked about the first commandment. We've talked about the second commandment. We've talked about, no, we haven't talked about the third commandment yet, have we? We will. We've talked about the fourth. We've talked about the fifth. We haven't talked about murdering. We haven't talked about, we have talked about adultery a little bit. We've talked about stealing. Well, we've got a few left, don't we? 31. Give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. Mediums. What are we talking about? It appears that we are taking advice from these people instead of following Yehovah's set-apart ways. Necromancing, it seems to me, is what we're talking about with this word right here. It's the first one. Mediums, mumblers, pratters, orb, or av. One who evokes the dead, a ghost, possibly from their murmurings like the sound of wine pouring out of a wineskin. Here's the other one, a conjurer. People who say they know things. He's telling us, don't do that. Don't be involved in that. You know, this is what Samuel did when he went to see the witch at Endor. I think it was the Philistines that were coming after him, and he looked for advice from Yehovah. He sought the Urim and the Tumim from the high priest. No answer from Yehovah. He sought the prophet. No answer from Yehovah. What did he finally say? Find me a witch. Find me a conjurer. Find me somebody who can channel Samuel so that I can talk to Samuel. Don't do it. Don't do it. Bad idea. I guess we'll go to 32. Thou shalt rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man and fear thy Elohim. I am Yehovah. Have you noticed how many times Yehovah in this one chapter alone has said, I am Yehovah? Look at all the purple. I marked it for us so we can see it over and over and over again. It happens 16 times in this chapter. But what's wrong with this picture? We are taught to rise when a woman enters the room, not an elderly man. Look at the word we're talking about here for old man. Beard, elder. A long beard is a sign of old age, one who is old. The word is Zakain. Here, I just highlighted one spot in here. The person referring to was usually an old man. There's a couple places that I found in Torah where you could maybe try to argue that it was talking about an older woman, but almost always it's talking about an old man. Here's ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible. Talking about old, beard, to be old, beard, elder, as long as a sign of old age. Elder, one who is old. These are the leaders. These are the men that we were talking about that are leading Yehovah's people. Heads of the tribes, we'll see in Numbers as we go into some of those things. 33. And if a ger gores with thee in your land, you shall not mistreat him. Hear that? The ger can't be the thee, can he? Or the you. And the ger doesn't have land because only Israel's seed has land. They can become Israel's seed, and that's when Yehovah is going to start expanding our territories. Talked about that earlier today. So far does he expand our territories that after a while, we are too far from him to bring our shalomim. That's what inspired Deuteronomy 12:20 through like 22 that we read today. Give me meat to eat. Well, here's the one we talked about, 1934. This is really an important verse for understanding 1918. Remember, 1918 said, you shall not take any vengeance nor bear a grudge against my son, your people. My son, your people. And you shall love your neighbor. I am arguing that is the ger, as yourself, the Ezra. I am Yehovah. And I base it on this verse right here. Can't hardly see it in the New King James. Let me read it to you on the right. It says, the stranger who dwells among you shall be as you. One born in the land, be as you. And Ezra is what it's saying. And you shall love him as yourself. Y'all shall love him as you love yourself. For you all were strangers, gerim, in the land of Egypt. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Hear that? This is what I've been telling you all along. You can't be an Ezra unless you become a ger. You can't be a ger unless you leave the kingdom of your birth. Join yourself to Israel and become a gor with them. A ger who gores with them. A ger who dwells with them. A stranger who dwells with them. This is who we're talking about. This is who our neighbor really is. As one born in the land from you, who shall be the ger who dwells with thee. Thou shalt love him as thyself. For strangers ye were in Egypt's land. I am Yehovah. Must be another translation of that same verse. The ger is not the same as the Ezra, but we love him the same way that we love ourselves. Remember, it applies, Torah applies to the ger differently than it applies to the Ezra. We've seen it many times. But we're still going to love him as we love ourselves. As one brother loves another brother. People call me brother all the time. They have no clue. How are you my brother? They're an unmarried woman calling me brother. They don't know. They just don't know. They say it, and you say it enough, you think it's true, don't ya? Geez, you built all your theologies. So I had another guy tell me the other day, I'm in Christ and all this. Oh, it just went on and on. You in Christ, me in Christ, we're brothers. No, we're not. We're not. You got a long ways to go, pastor. And if you're teaching your congregation this nonsense, these doctrines and traditions of men, you're going to be destroyed. Look what Yehovah says. This is Jeremiah 23. This is where most of these pastors are at. Woe to those shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, says Yehovah. Therefore, thus says Yehovah, Elohim of Israel, against the shepherds who feed my people. You've scattered my flock, driven them away, and not attended to them. Behold, I will attend to you for the evil of your doings. Don't teach your people the doctrines and commandments of men. Learn what Yehovah's word actually says. Teach them that. Learn about the ger. Learn about the Ezra. Learn about who Yehovah gives his commandments to. We teach nothing but Christian theology. Blah, 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 blah. It's enough to make a person sick. I got fed up of it after years of hearing it. 35. You shall do no injustice in judgment. Listen what he says. In measurement, in length, weight, and volume. length, weight, and quantity. You shall have honest scales. If we were to punctuate this correctly, it would be a semicolon, because now we're going to talk about what the scales are. Honest weights. In fact, let's talk about what it is. It's Zadik weights. Zadik dry volume measurements and Zadik liquid volume measurements. Those are the honest scales that we're going to have. Last verse. How did we start this section? Really, this section started here, I think. According to the doings of the land of Egypt, where you dwelt, you shall not do. According to the doings of the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you, you shall not do, nor shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall observe my judgments and keep my ordinances to walk in them. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. Now look at this last verse. Therefore you shall observe my statutes and all my judgments and perform them. I am Yehovah. Well, next week we're going to talk about many of the sexual sins that we talked about in 18. And this time we're going to see the consequences, the judgments that are related to these statutes. You break one of Yehovah's statutes, it has consequences. And these are the consequences that we have got to learn and understand. We don't have men living in our land practicing these kinds of wickedness. They can't stay with us. They got to leave. Many times they're going to be killed. Yehovah wants his men to be holy as he is holy. Remember, we said the foundation for the new ger coming in was those things that are going to get us kicked out of Israel. That's why James talked about the meat sacrificed to idols. Meat killed improperly. Yeah, it's clean meat, but it's killed improperly. It's bringing damnation on us and getting us kicked out from among his people. Blood, sexual immorality, and things strangled. I should probably say things strangled and blood, and then sexual immorality. And the Sabbath, not doing any of those, or doing some of those and not doing the Sabbath, are all grounds for getting you kicked out of the land from among his people. We want to be able to stay with Yehovah's people, which is why we got to learn these things right away. But all we ever learn is clean food, and we think that's the end of it. Well, we saw today there was more to the story when we talked about the Ten Commandments. We build precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little, as we begin to understand Yehovah's eternal and unchanging ways. Well, I have to leave now. Thank you for joining me today. We'll see you again next week, all right? Bye now.